Almost a year after St. Paul, Minnesota passed one of the most strict rent control laws in the entire country, the city council rolled back a lot of the rules. But is it too little and too late for landlords? I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an update to the story about the St. Paul rent control ordinance. Now, I've covered this many times in many different videos because, it really interests me that a place outside of the coastal big cities passed a rent control law. So St. Paul actually passed one of the most strict rent control laws in the entire country. They capped rent increases at like 3%, and it didn't exempt new build construction. It didn't offer any exemptions at all. It was a very, very basic rent control law, and the result was that the grand majority of development within the city just stopped. It just stopped. Developers fled. They were like, we're not going to invest here. We can't make any money, and we're going to take our business to the surrounding area. There's no reason for us to invest here and, spend millions and millions of dollars if we can just go right over here to the city right next door and, not have any of the rules that you're trying to force down our throat. And even with these new exemptions that they've put in place, that problem still is going to exist, okay? So why would you invest in a place that has rent control when the city 1 mile away, right next door, doesn't have any rent control? I wouldn't, okay? If I was a developer, I'd be like, you know what? I'm not doing it. I'm not wasting my time putting one penny there. If I'm a landlord, I am a landlord, but if I was a landlord in St. Paul, I'd sell my properties, I'd sell my single family houses to owner occupants and, get the heck out of the business and go buy properties in the surrounding suburbs, okay? Because they don't have rent control and I don't have to comply with that garbage there, okay? So yeah, this exemption nonsense, right? They're trying to save the law. They should have just threw it out because it's a waste of time. It is a waste of time, and it's only going to hurt the property owners there. It's only going to hurt development. It's going to hurt the city as a whole. Okay, so it is a bad deal. And the people who put it in place, they did not understand the economics behind why rent control laws do not work. Okay? Whew. It is one of those topics that it gets me hot, okay? I hate rent control, hate it. Anyway, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you believe that any, tweaks or exemptions to a rent control law are going to make any difference whatsoever to the amount of development or the amount of investment within the city of St. Paul, Minnesota? If you do, then tell me I'm wrong. I don't mind hearing it, okay? But, put your comments in the comment section down below, and, we can have a discussion right there. So let's get into the article. This article is coming from fox9.com, and it says, Exemptions for St. Paul rent control approved by City Council. Let's get into it. Less than a year after voters approved rent control measures, the St. Paul City Council approved exemptions Wednesday that will allow landlords to bank increases and offer 20-year exemptions to new construction. By a vote of 4-3, the council approved a rent stabilization amendment, Ordinance 22-37, that effectively alters the rent stabilization ordinance passed by voters on November 2nd, 2021. The approved amendment includes a 20-year exemption for new construction or reclassification from non-residential to residential. It also approved a partial vacancy decontrol policy, which allows landlords to bank up to 3% rent increases over a period of time and then reset rent after a vacancy. So they added these little things in here, and I'm going to go through them right now. So it says that they basically they're going to exempt new construction from the rent control policy for the first 20 years. Now that they say supposedly has helped keep New York and Los Angeles from being, just no new construction. But what developers find is that, hey, all of the new construction coming in is very, very high end. It's at the very top of the market. There aren't any, the missing middle construction. Like when you go around a place like Omaha or Kansas City, the places where I invest, you'll see lots of garden style apartment complexes, just places where average people can live. And the reason that you see so many of them is because, hey, this is the, where the middle class people and sometimes lower class people, they live in those style of apartment buildings. But how much of that kind of development are you going to see in St. Paul, Minnesota, when you know that, hey, we've got this rent control law in place, and unless we build extremely high end, we're not going to be able to cover the costs that are associated with development, okay? That's why these rent control laws, they create basically very low end apartments, right? And then you have the very high end new construction stuff that doesn't have to comply with the law. So I can just imagine there being all of these older apartments that are already built, or they're already over 20 years old, and they're just dilapidated in horrible shape. And that's what we see in these places that have rent control. The approved amendment, oh wait, I already read that. Rent control rollback. Previously, stakeholders created a 41-member rent stabilization task force to examine the potential policy changes and the city's rent stabilization practices. The group met 15 times throughout the year. I, to this day, do not understand why we worked this hard to pass this ordinance. We got almost 10,000 signatures on the ballot, and we won by a lot. Why were we tasked to do this, said Catherine Banbury, a task force member and lifelong renter at a meeting. Approved recommendations by the group included a 15-year exemption, but opinions on a banking or vacancy decontrol policy remained mixed. So yeah, banking rent increases. So if there's a landlord, and this is what a lot of landlords do, they'll get a tenant up in their unit, right? And the tenant is good, they're paying on time, landlord is making a decent profit, so they won't raise the rent on that tenant, right? But in a place that has rent control, if you don't raise the rent every single year, you lose out on that rent increase. But according to their law now, their exemption, you can bank that increase. So let's say that you had a tenant in your unit for 3 years. You never rose the rent on them. Well, when the tenant moves out, then you can raise the rent by 9% instead of the 3%, which was in the original city law. Okay, so, I mean, I understand it, but at the same time, don't forget what inflation is this year in particular. Okay, we're talking about 9% inflation this year. So if we have 9% inflation, they're only allowing a 3% rent increase. Well, you're already behind. Even if you wait 5 years before you raise the rent, and then you're able to do a 15% increase, you're still way, way below market rates. So this isn't actually a good thing. Okay, this is just more pandering to the people who want cheap rents forever, in my opinion. Okay, this is, it might make a small difference on some projects, but I really doubt that the majority of landlords within the city are going to be doing any better under these new exemptions than they were before the exemptions were passed. The only difference now is, right, the landlords are us. We're going to be doing bad. If you're a real estate developer building a new property, then you might be able to build a property profitably, and at least for the first 20 years, make a decent profit. But if you're a landlord like me, let me think here. I have one property that is younger than 20 years old. No. Okay, so I have one property that's 24 years old. That's my newest property. Every one of my other properties would be underneath this rent control law. So, and I'm just an average small landlord. Now imagine all the small landlords in St. Paul, it's pretty much going to be the same thing. Most landlords don't own brand new properties. Low-income renters have also expressed concerns about rents rising already in the wake of the ordinance passing. In a statement Thursday, the SEIU, Minnesota State Council, condemned the changes and called on people to veto Carter if they ultimately passed. Our union, which brings together thousands of low and what are they taking advice from a union for? Thousands of low and middle income workers in St. Paul in healthcare, home care, property services, and schools, most of whom are renters, has been proud to support rent stabilization. But the drastic change council members Prince, Brindamone, Tolbert, and Ballinger voted to approve takes the best part of what has come from all of that hard work, and guts it all together from the ordinance, said Philip Cryan, executive vice president. You know what? I'm not going to even read any more of this. Okay, they got some union, which is a socialist, basically socialist workers person there, right? Pushing for this socialist housing policy nonsense. I can't stand it. And the fact that they're even quoting this person doesn't even make any sense, okay? Because this person doesn't have anything in particular to do with the situation. Now, the city council members, they realize that, hey, if we don't at least modify this, all development in the city is going to stop. I mean, I had read before, over 80% of the development in the city had stopped just because of the way the law was written before. And they know, hey, our city's going to die if we leave the law in place as it is. Now, we can't repeal the law. They know they can't repeal the law because the voters voted it in, but that is what they need to be working on, okay? They modified it for now. Now they need to repeal it. They need to figure out how to get this thing out of there before their city faces the ultimate consequence, which is disinvestment, 100% disinvestment and blight, okay? Because that is what they can expect, blight. There's not any way that a landlord or a real estate developer is going to choose to invest in St. Paul with their stupid rent control policy over any of the other areas nearby that don't have that policy. So yeah, just a nice little update on the St. Paul rent control thing. Too little, too late, in my opinion, for landlords and for real estate developers.